Put your pants on.
That's right. Okay, everyone. Thanks a lot for coming. This is a special comics coloring with in Photoshop with comics creator Blair Shedd.
Hello.
Well, I'm going to start over. I'm going to edit this out. So.
Okay.
Fix it in post.
That's right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming to this special Making Comics Live demo Q&A. We're doing comics coloring in Photoshop and covering that subject with pro comics creator Blair D. Shedd. Blair has been working for 8 years in professional comics, predominantly doing covers and some amount of interior work. He is a 1999 Kubert School graduate, and he is also a member of Vermont Comic Creators, an organization that represents people who do comics work in the state of Vermont. He has done a pretty large body of work for companies like Sitcom Comics, where he does interior end covers for the all-ages superhero book Telepathetic, as well as covers for the Titan Comics newsstand comics of Doctor Who, Robotech, Warhammer, Assassin's Creed, Sherlock. He is a really, really talented guy, and we are very, very happy to have him here today. Hello, Blair.
Hello. Glad to be here. Which I'm actually at home, so I'm always glad to be here.
That's right. So, Blair, have you always worked digitally as your primary art tool?
I would say, as far as the professional career goes, yes. And that's because when I was trying seriously to break in again around 2007, 2008, I started hearing horror stories from friends who had young children, where they'd leave the room and come back to find a magic marker or food-altered page that they were working on. And they were all working traditionally, and so it then became a struggle of whiteout and Photoshop to fix all those pages. And I had a 5-year-old at the time, or actually it was 3 at the time, and I figured I could probably go digital. And while I had done digital art in the past when I was working at a event marketing company, they actually bought us Cintiqs, not to keep, but for the office. I didn't have a tablet, so I actually had to go out and buy a tablet in 2008. No, that was a Graphire tablet, which I think would be replaced with the Bamboo or Intuos from Wacom nowadays.
Right, a tablet on the desktop, meaning literally your desk, but looking at the monitor and having to develop that kind of skill of not looking where you're
right
manipulating your stylus, right?
Yeah, a lot of hand-eye coordination.
But now, do you work on a monitor style tablet like a Cintiq or something like that?
Yep, I work on a Cintiq, 2015 Cintiq Companion 2, which is a self-contained tablet slash Cintiq slash Windows PC, but I usually have it hooked up to my Mac. But when I go on the road, I can run full Photoshop and full Manga Studio and the like, just about whatever I need to, as long as it's available for Windows, which is pretty much everything.
And you've been with a Cintiq since they started?
Pretty much. I mean, that was 2003 when they bought us those for the office, and that if it might not have been the earliest, but it was one of the earliest. I think it was about $1,500–$1,600 when they came out, and that was a what was that? That was a 15WX. So you know they weren't touch sensitive. They had no buttons other than a power button, and screen resolution was really low. They were kind of dim. But when I after I got that Graphire and I thought, you know what, I should get back into using a Cintiq because it'd be much easier. I actually went and bought a used 2003 15X, and then it only ran me about $400, and I kind of liked it. And yeah, after that I got a 12WX, which was a bit smaller but higher resolution. And now I'm with this, and I'll probably stick with this for a while.
The 12 was almost really promoted as like a under your arm kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but it still had a power brick, and it was kind of unwieldy, and it didn't have. I mean, you still needed to hook up to a computer and all that. The companion that I'm using now, and the companion before this, either came with Android as an operating system, or I want to say it didn't come with an operating system. It was like a Android or nothing or something like that. But it also wouldn't hook up to Macs. So it was the newer one that I have here, and the ones after this, which I think they've even changed the line to something completely different, that have the hookup abilities. Oops.
I think it was Android or Windows 8 at the time.
Yeah. And I was just told they were incompatible with Macs, which was a bummer. But now it isn't. So, and for the time being, I'd still prefer this over a iPad Pro, because those still don't run full programs of anyone's software. So can you guys see this that I'm working on?
Yep.
Okay.
So this is you were telling me before we started the show, this is actually the start of a cover for a issue of Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's for the 12th Doctor, and the idea I had was it's going to be sort of these infinite doctors, infinite 12th Doctors, all looking shocked, with sort of infinite Earths in the sky. And I've been doing a lot of weird, trippy stuff with Doctor Who covers lately, and so I want to see where I can push this. But I had originally penciled this on board, and then when I scanned it in, I completely redid it because I wasn't feeling it, and I didn't like the angle, and so it's going to end up being mostly a digital piece. But I'm still not liking it, and that's why I'm doing some last-minute corrections here before I port it over to Photoshop. As far as coloring, I'm only going to be doing just the main head here tonight, or the main Doctor here. I'm not going to do all of the finishings and effects and stuff, because a lot of that's going to be trial and error anyway.
But you do your drawing in Manga Studio EX.
Yeah, this is I'm using 4 right now. There is a newer version, and I do have it, but I haven't been brave enough to sit down and try and make it work yet. Because I usually have enough going on at once that I don't want to interrupt any deadlines or delay any projects by messing up or having too much of a problem with the new program. And it's still working for now with a couple of errors here and there, but as long as it's not burdensome, I'll be fine for now.
Why do you work in Manga Studio?
I still get the best line out of it for a time now.
Yeah.
That's not me.
If
For a time now, I've had
if
a.
anyone has a cell phone or other audio, can you just turn that down and or put it on vibrate or something like that? That'd be great. Thank you. Can you repeat what you were just saying?
I've had sort of a jitter / tremor in my hand for a while now,
Yeah.
and so when you see me sketching at a convention, it's still the same style, but it's usually rougher looking because I really can't get these smooth lines. And I was using Photoshop at first to draw digitally, but I would still get the shaky lines. And there's a certain amount of correction available in Manga Studio that you can. I mean, right now, let's see if I take this line here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got no correction on it.
Right.
And if I usually keep it at 7 or 8, which sometimes is a problem, but you can pump it all the way up to 20. And if I try to make the same S shape here, and I do it fast, it starts to really correct the line.
Yeah, it really wires it out.
Yeah.
And so really, this is very, in essence, not dissimilar to similar functions. I don't know if they call it auto smoothing or whatever it is, but in Illustrator.
Yeah. Except without having to work with all the vector points and such.
Right. Oh, so this is a raster program.
Correct.
Okay. I've never used it, and also for anybody who might be watching who's not familiar with Manga Studio, so it definitely had. I know I did a little research before starting the show, and I guess it is pre-engineered to have brushes that mimic analog tools like pencil and various kinds of brush or nib sort of markers, whatever.
This is my normal penciling pencil, and this is you can easily move this over to Photoshop because if you zoom all the way in, it's just dots.
Yeah.
Unlike Photoshop, which would make that anti-aliased, whatever.
Right. Interesting.
And if I were to shrink this whole thing down, see, instead of getting those anti-alias edges, it gets a little jagged, but it's still black and white.
Right.
Like a bitmap.
So I don't get those halos around the edge.
What was that, Randall?
I said like bitmap.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like. Yeah.
Let's see.
When you get ready to bring this over to Photoshop, could you also open a similar cover that is finished?
Yeah. So you mean in Manga Studio?
No, I
or
meant
in Photoshop.
Like in Photoshop, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to give people an idea of where your endpoint gets, once you're done, and then just get right back into your process of coloring.
I mean, anyone can. I know most of you guys, but you can throw out questions anyway. I usually get pretty silent.
That's okay. I think we're all watching too. I definitely have a few questions, so I can prime the pump a little bit.
Okay.
One thing I've noticed is that you work very fast, and I'm sure.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I would have that question too. Do I work very fast?
Well, it appears as such. Even though I understand you already had you probably you're reworking the same thing, so I'm sure you have a little bit of gain on maybe what you would have.
Well, at this point, from the shoulders, all of the clothing here, I have that rough outline, and I'm just making it up as I go along now. But because I'll watch videos of like non-time-lapse videos on like Instagram and such of pros working, and I think I'm just absolutely slow.
Well, I mean, it's all relative too. I mean, I'm sure that there are deadline dependent projects which would require you to go faster than you are. Although I would say most pro comics inkers, because I think that would be probably the closest analog to what we're doing right
Yeah.
now here. I don't see a lot faster. I might see more intricate because a lot of people are into doing, Jim Lee kind of looking stuff. It seems still,
Yeah.
which just requires that much more work per inch, I think. But I mean, like in terms of pro level work, I don't see anything necessarily slower per se.
Okay.
But to me, and I think to a lot of people who are watching this, you're working pretty light speed compared to the way that I would be working by hand and in actual ink on a piece of Bristol board.
And I think that's possibly because of the courage of the undo button.
Right. Right. That was kind of where I was going. Yeah.
Remember James O'Barr, who created the Crow, saying a bunch of bad stuff about digital artists, about how since they have that undo, they don't get brave and try different things. And I would argue they try more things because they know they can't mess it up.
I would agree with that.
I'm not brave enough to actually have that conversation with him, but I'm going to have the opportunity this summer to see him again. And I'm like, I should tell him, but no. And as you see, I just deleted all that because I didn't like where it was going. And I really should do my rendering on another layer. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of guys who are working in traditional non-undoing material or media probably won't be as brave if they're on a deadline. Like, should I try something new? Should I, what if I cover this in white paint and kick it down the stairs? It's just, it might come out with a neat effect, or you might put yourself back 20 hours. While digitally, I could say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Digitally, I can just virtually do that or mess it up. Or what if this was on a piece of burnt paper or whatever? And if it looks terrible, just scrap the whole thing. And or scrap that much of the change and go back to what I had.
Explain how you're quickly throwing in that cross, the hatching, but immediately deleting, cutting away. Like you're sort of like explain that process.
Well, okay. Right now, one layer has this part of the drawing on it, and the other layer. Is
it the neck area or something? The T-shirt area?
No, that's all. Yeah, this area in here.
Okay.
Can you see my cursor when I'm doing that?
I can't see the hand. It's a little tiny because you're zoomed out, but yeah.
Yeah. But I do the. This is why I should be doing the rendering on another layer. One, if I don't like it, I can just get rid of the whole thing at once. But two, since these areas are already defined, if I'm doing rendering in those, and I don't have to sort of pull my punches as far as putting in a line, because the line won't look as smooth if I'm just starting here.
Right, yes.
And that might not be what I want to do, so I can go much bigger and select the area, select the inverse of the area, and then or select the area that I want to delete and just delete it.
Chop it off. So that allows you to get that full stroke and not have to be destructive about how you're doing it.
Correct.
Yeah. For people who don't know what that means, I mean, there's the common theory, philosophy of destructive and non-destructive work in, let's say, Photoshop or a program like this, and meaning if you do all of your work on the same layer, that is in fact destructive. Meaning you cannot go backwards. I guess you can go backwards and undos, but you can't play around with the different drawing, coloring, effects, etc. that you've done. If you do it on separate layers and actually break out parts of the thing on separate layers, then you're non-destructively working on the piece, and so therefore you're able to granularly choose what you're working on at a given time.
Funny, I've heard guys brag about how few layers they work on and such, and I don't get why that's a brag, because I mean, we're not doing parkour here. We're most of the time we're trying to do something for a client, and so if I got all brave and kept flattening this out every time I made a change, what happens when I screw up?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's part of the reason I'm working digitally, is so I can fix screw ups. If I wanted the dare of not being able to change much, then I just go and work in traditional media and put on a blindfold. It's something that I would brag about.
I think it's youthful machismo stuff, and it doesn't really have any basis in mature workflow, unless it's a situation that would have been going on 10 years ago, where RAM and processing ability and memory, or rather storage, was
Yeah.
was not what it is today, and then you were kind of forced to save those layers to its own file, flatten what you have, and move forward, and always have these like different versions as you went along. I mean, 15 years ago when I was working in Photoshop, that was a necessity for
Yeah.
the design work I was doing, because we only had a 300 meg drive, and only had what 3 megs of RAM or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
so but nowadays, yeah, it doesn't seem to make any sense.
You'll see my windows occasionally do this because I'm, of course, switching to
Right.
stuff. I have reference photos up on my other screen. Let me see. I should be able to just do that by going. Oops, hold on. Screen share thingy. There it goes. Okay, yeah. This is my main screen.
I see.
So actually, I'm going to shrink this a bit. Okay, hide that thing. There we go. So I actually have this $400 12th Doctor figure. So I thought I might as well put it to good use. It's obviously a different hairstyle, and he only has one expression, but I can shine a light at that and then take a photo. Oftentimes, I will use these right here. Found these on DeviantArt. It's photos of this styrofoam head from all different angles. Up here, they indicate where the light is coming from, and then they go around it pretty much 360, sometimes more.
That's awesome.
So you can just use that for lighting. And oops. And I also have an app called Handy now. I think it's 99 cents on the App Store, probably Android as well. And you can take faces and certain modeled hands, basic faces, basic hands, and basic feet, and apply light to them. And you can have up to 3 light sources, and you can differ the colors of the light sources. So if you're working on a painting or something like that, you can get the lighting reference. If you know, he's going to be looking at a red light source, but he's backlit by blue or what have you, it'll give you the correct look at it.
How did you come to this particular client? Because I know you've done a lot of covers for Titan. So
I originally started doing Doctor Who with IDW. IDW lost the license. Titan got the license, and I begged them.
Oh, so you were doing. So I could have said that. Then yeah, you were. So you were one of the cover artists for Doctor Who titles.
I was one of the interior artists, and then I became cover artist. Yep, over at IDW.
Oh, okay. Are there differences working with the two companies? And no, I'm not looking for negative dish. I just mean.
Yeah, I think
whatever.
I think the BBC likes Titan a lot more because they let them do a lot more and get away with a lot more.
And
There's a lot more leeway. Like every cover I did for IDW had to be vetted by people in the rough stage, and then there'd be changes. I had maybe 1 or 2 notes ever on any of the covers I've worked on. It was mostly like color choices, and I placed a head too close to where the title would be. That's why I now keep this generic layout. I'm allowed to overlap to a certain degree, but not much more than that.
Right. And Titan is the UK comics publisher that's been around actually for a while now, right? So.
Not well. They've been a magazine publisher for a long time. Comics are still relatively new. They used to do, I think, reprints of Marvel and DC stuff,
right.
For the UK market.
So that cuts a lot of time and aggravation.
Yeah.
And that kind of more direct access to a publisher that has, in turn, more leeway, or at least they're trusted more to do things correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
This what I'm doing here, instead of just using the paint bucket to just fill in an area, I've recently become enamored with this sort of haphazard fill-in style that I see some artists do. It creates unintentional texture, and maybe not even like realistic texture, but for me it's more interesting to look at. So I've been putting it into my own stuff a lot, and I mean I even do it with hand-drawn stuff. It's a little easier digitally because I can just mask off an area.
Yeah, it's evoking what would happen with a paintbrush or a flooded inking brush.
Yeah. I mean, I could just easily fill in the area, and that's what I used to do. But
it's not the same.
Yeah, I enjoy this, especially since I'm working with such. Sometimes I can do action poses, but the Doctor isn't Spider-Man. I can't have him crouching on a building or always crouching on the TARDIS or jumping out of the TARDIS. Not all the time. So it gives a little bit of movement where there isn't any.
That makes me think of a question, which is, you've worked now on which Doctors?
Let's see, 4, 8. 4 War, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Right. So because each of those actors' physicality is very well known, even if a viewer is not consciously aware of it, people who are devoted to these characters are inadvertently becoming studies of these actors' physicalities. So I would wonder if, in order to have authenticity and verisimilitude in these specific licensed characters, you have to, if you're going to do your job right, go beyond the face looking right. I would imagine you have to study what these actors look like when they run, stand, twist, look shocked or look happy or whatever, right? I mean, there's more to it than just simply looking like Doctor Who-ish Doctor Who, right? There's more to it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every actor brings their own thing to it, and so therefore all of them are a bit different. They all stand differently. They all show displeasure differently. They all smile differently. They all, heck, even walk differently. So if I wasn't a fan, I would still have to go and watch all of these episodes to actually figure out how they move.
Have you done a lot of frame grabs of episode frames so that you can study how one actor twists, bends, whatever, as opposed to another?
Yeah. Especially early on. to a certain degree, I now know like how to treat most of them. The Ninth Doctor, when he's just standing and looking at something, he folds his arms, for instance. The 11th Doctor always has his hands up in front of him, elbows bent, fingers constantly moving, twiddling, if you
Which
want to call
one
it
is
that.
that? I don't know the numbers, so I'm sorry. But
11th Doctor is the bow tie and tweed.
Oh, is that Matt Smith?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm getting at. It's like they all have their own body language and so on. Now, you're doing blue here. This is because basically you're blue penciling forms that you are now going to execute in black. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I might have just tried to wing it, but I wasn't sure about where I wanted everything, so I just wanted to quickly put in some blue to mark that off. So this is over on YouTube right now too, right?
We are live on YouTube. We have been the whole time. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hello, YouTube. And if anybody is watching and wants to ask questions through the chat, you can certainly type that in there. I would just ask that you follow the directions I left there, which is to please preface an actual question with all caps, the word question, so that I can just identify it. Now, I noticed that another identifier of your work is you tend to have a very open illustration style. You have a lot of room, a lot of white, and you're very, I would say, judicious about your lines. Tell me about how you kind of came to that look.
Yeah. I think it's twofold, especially with Doctor Who. One of the first reasons I try to keep things sparse is if I have to do any do-overs, it's less drawing work. Two, I mean, someone like Peter Capaldi here, he's 57, though he did drugs like Keith Richards back in the 80s, and so he looks a bit older. But they don't really want to show off the fact he's old. So I actually have a lot more lines here that are going to show up in the final. A lot of these I'm going to knock out. I'm going to actually color them in. But I try not to overburden it, because I have in the past put in a lot of hatching and such, and it really ages the character. Oh, maybe that's what's bugging me. Hold on. Jim Lee once said, and he probably wasn't the first to say it, art, especially comic art, is a war of millimeters. Sometimes things just don't look right until you shift them about a bit. Oh, yes. That brings me a sense of relief. So apparently that's where that eye belonged.
I'm sorry, could you tell us what
the eye didn't look right to me. The face just has been the one I just moved.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm sorry. The left or the right?
It was here. I moved it there.
Okay, gotcha.
Which was just enough that I couldn't figure out why this looked so weird to me. And now that I've moved it, it feels a lot better to me.
I see.
And it might not, if I put this over his actual face, it might not be where his eye actually is. But once again, it's a matter of is right and looks right, and to me that looks right, so I'm going to go with it.
Tell me a little more about looking right versus being right.
I forget what comic book artist said that. It's an old thing that they used to say at the Gilbert School a lot, but there was a comic book artist he would talk about anatomy. It wasn't Kirby or anyone like that, but Kirby himself was sometimes really loose on what actual anatomy was, but he was rarely called on it because it still looked okay. And sometimes, especially if you're trying to get movement or a particular mood or what have you, sometimes having the thing look more better than it would actually look in real life, or look different than it would actually look in real life, counts for more than making it accurate. than making it absolutely photoreal. Because it's not an anatomy thing, but when you see Batman in the comics, especially when he had the yellow bat symbol, where eyes, or he would be a silhouette in a dark alley, and the yellow of the bat symbol. If there was an actual guy standing in the dark there, one, you probably wouldn't see a silhouette, but even if you did, you're not going to see his eyes, and you're probably not going to make out that bat symbol.
No.
And so that's a matter of, it looks right. It looks more.
It looks Batman.
It looks Batman, yeah.
So have you, at this point, kind of made your own personal laundry list of what looks Doctor Who and what does not look Doctor Who?
Not really. That's changing all the time. When I started over at IDW, my first work on Doctor Who with the 10th Doctor was very cartoony. And then when I started, near the end of IDW having the license, I started to get a little more photoreal and sticking to that. And then when it came to the 9th Doctor series that I drew for Titan, I tried to get as close to photoreal without going overboard and taking years to draw everything. And it's a case of you can please all of the people some of the time and some of the people all of the time. And there are people who photoreal take, so, and like anything cartoony. So I decided to make me happy, which was sort of this medium this happy medium I'm at now, where there's a lot more lines than if I went straight cartoony, but it's also not as photoreal as it could be. Like I have in the past rendered his eyebrows like I rendered the hair, sort of hair by hair. But I like drawing eyebrows like this. They're much more angular, and you get the same effect.
I think they're more readily expressive, and if you have to also as an artist, and you could definitely expand on this if you want, or explain this to us if you want, that you have to, because of the deadlines you're on, or any artist doing pro comics would be on, you have to make decisions in your process about how you're going to draw specific parts of things, so that you have more time for. So that you can make those procedures that are repetitive, and then leave yourself room for the things that have to be brand new every time, right?
Correct.
I mean, because I'm just guessing, but on a given Doctor Who comic, so this is the 12th Doctor, or 12th Doctor.
12.
So you've at this point you've mastered drawing him as to a degree where the publisher is happy, right? And so that's out of the way, and there are whatever given companion, you have that kind of worked out, so you have that out of the way. The TARDIS outside inside, so that you have down to
plus I had someone make me a Google SketchUp model that I can plus I also have toys of it, so I could either shoot a photo or just spin around this model, this CGI model I have to get the angles I need.
So you have all of those things that are predictable now, and are kind of like rote memory a bit, or at least mostly, right? So you have to, if you don't do that, then every time you're encountering new story elements that are unique to that issue or that cover or whatever, you would be climbing the mountain on everything, and you might be late. But if you don't come up with this is how I draw the 12th Doctor's eyebrows every time, you would be in a lot of trouble, because all these little bits of pieces accumulate to time, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So how did you come to, not the specific detail of his eyebrows, let's say, but how do you make those decisions about, this is going to be simpler to draw, this is going to be more detailed to draw, to have the payoff of the bring it together in one unit?
I think it came to the fact that I hate when I render hair as just a mass with a few lines. The only time I ever do that is if a woman or man has long blonde hair, then you don't want to over render it, because then it starts to become a darker hair. so I like rendering hair like how I render hair here. But if you render a lot of people's eyebrows realistically, they don't look as powerful or thick as they actually appear in real life. So by just breaking that down into a shape, it works out better in my eyes, and and it saves time that I'd be spending rendering out eyebrow by eyebrow his face. Oops.
So we have a couple of other fellow Vermont comic creators, and they wanted to be in on this so they could both listen but also ask questions. Jesse or Randall, do you guys have any questions?
None at the moment. I'm just kind of enjoying listening to what you guys are talking about.
Well, I kind of thought up one earlier, especially Blair, when you were making those really bold brush marks to fill in the blacks roughly. There's a lot of scratch going on, and I'm not sure if that's a result of your microphone being really close to where you're actually using your tablet. But I remember having a discussion with Jesse actually a long time ago about texture. And when you're drawing, how the texture of the paper, for me anyway, because I'm a traditional cartoonist, I don't do digital stuff all that much, matters, and the feel of the paper matters. Yeah. And you can buy tablets with different or rougher textures, or some people even like put a piece of paper over their tablet to get that feel. How much does that matter to you?
I do like texture to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. There we go. Because if everything would, I'd slip around a lot more. I mean, even to compensate for that, let me switch my camera here for a second. I went to, okay, yeah, screen share. Can you guys see me right at the moment?
Yes,
we can.
Okay. I went to just the local Dollar General, and I bought 3 for $2 pair of winter gloves, and I cut all of the fingers off except for these two.
Oh yeah.
And so that allows my hand to slide across the Cintiq a bit more, a bit smoother.
I have something called a smudge guard that does the exact same thing. It just gives you the last 2 fingers. Yours is probably way cheaper than mine, though.
Yeah, and I still have more. I have more gloves I can ruin.
I was just about to ask, because aren't the ones that are made for Cintiqs, aren't they incredibly expensive?
Well, they're at least, the ones I've seen are at least $15 to $20 to start. Yeah. And I had considered buying those when I thought, I'll try the cheap method first and then see where it goes. For a while, I was using under the Cintiq. No, I'll probably put it away because I don't use it as much right now. My wife knitted me a pinky cozy that would just go around the pinky. But I actually found that this part of my finger started to rub on the screen too, and I'd get a blister there. So I decided to have a bit more than just the one finger covered. And it's comfortable enough. I mean, it gets itchy after a while, but my fingers are free to operate the stylus as I will. I'm just deciding if I should move on to Photoshop. I think I'm about to move on to Photoshop.
That would be awesome. So could you, like I was saying, in addition to moving this over and obviously doing the rest of your demo, can you open up a typical Doctor Who or other cover? I think Who would be great because thematically it would stay in line with what you're doing. And
okay.
Just explain a bit before you get into doing it, actually doing it, what sort of is going on with that image.
Let's just one second. Put some stuff here.
Excuse me.
Okay, just moving files around. All right. All right, first let me export this out. I got to export it to desktop.
And that's done by going into File, Export. There's an export window.
Yeah, and you can either do it by document or by pixels. And I usually just do it by pixels, so it stays exactly the same size.
What's the difference in terms of exporting?
I'm not quite sure, quite honestly, but it feels like, or when I tried early on, it seemed like there were some things changed. Some size parameters changed if I didn't use pixels as my and I've lost it. Where'd it go? As my export setting. Oh, here it is. Colors. Go. And colors. Yes, let's open up the document. All right. No, that's okay. Just one sec. And it comes in grayscale, so I usually have to, at that point, I color in. Oops, don't do that. I color in RGB.
You do.
Yeah. Though the final file is when I save it as a TIFF, I save it in CMYK.
You do. Okay.
It's just a lot more blending abilities are available to me in RGB.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit? That critical difference between RGB and CMYK in Photoshop?
How about Randall? Randall works with
I don't
printing.
mean the technical color theory or color mechanics, but rather, like you're saying, there are a number of different features of Photoshop that simply are not available if you're working in CMYK mode. But like, what kinds of tools are not at your disposal if you are?
Well, I don't use them often. Lens flares, certain ways I have pre-programmed Photoshop to treat layers or put effects on layers. They stop working because one particular part or another isn't available in CMYK. And so I like to have all of that ability up front.
Now,
and then,
do you ever work in proof setup CMYK mode so that you can just view as if it were?
I'll every once in a while switch over. Most of the time, it's not too much an issue that I have to keep my eye on it. They're not really looking for very specific colors from me most of the time.
Is that also because I've noticed that modern printing seems to be much more capable of handling a vivid range of colors that it didn't even a few years ago. And it seems like as the years go by, I find that I have to proof or work in a CMYK proofing view than I used to. Like, it seems like it isn't as critical. But is that your experience?
Yeah, I think it was definitely more important back when I was working at that graphics company. They worried about it all the time because we were doing like vehicle wraps and printing things onto tarps and tents and stuff. So they cared about every little bit. Nowadays, I try not to worry myself too much. Sometimes people like do I save it in CMYK? Well, now I do, but first issue of Telepathetic, I don't even think they wanted in CMYK. So
interesting.
They now do. The second issue that I'm working on, they do. But yeah, that was just I don't like stressing out about that anymore.
Yeah, and they would obviously, on the print or the pre-press end, they would do minor corrections if they had to.
Right.
Randall, I was a question on the CMYK. I think Randall might be able to help me out with this. I remember in school there was a whole thing about how we had to work in CMYK to make sure that our colors matched up when we printed. And I've always done it where I've worked entirely in CMYK, and then converted it to RGB if I needed to put it on the web. I guess that is not as much of an issue anymore. But Randall, do you remember that at all?
That's still a thing. I mean, we get people who submit constantly files that were created in RGB, exist in RGB space, are basically web, ready, and then they try to print them and wonder why the colors look way different. So yeah, before you go to print, at least you almost always want to go back to CMYK because that's what we're going to print with, and there is a difference.
All right.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought.
Looking for a cover.
Now, I don't know about going back the other direction. I've never actually tried, really, to create anything in CMYK and then convert it specifically back to RGB because I'm always trying to capture, the colors that I've put on paper with, marker or paint or what have you, and represent it on the web in the most, original way that I can. But it might be a fun experiment.
So coming up here is the cover I did from the previously for Doctor Who.
Okay, so this is a.
It is I work at 7.7 by 10.5, 600 DPI,
right.
Which is what they want me to. Like Telepathetic, I think I work slightly larger, which is funny because it's detailed. This is the one there. So yeah, this is something that was in the middle because it's actually an impossible shape, and I didn't want to figure that out in pencil.
Yeah.
You
were unfortunately. I'm sorry, Blair. You were breaking up a little bit and stuttering. Can you repeat what you said about the shape here?
That I didn't develop it in pencil because it's an impossible shape.
Right. And even if it was a possible shape, it's far too.
And I didn't want to give myself.
Right. It's too geometric to.
I might have tried, but yeah, I mean, this is. Yeah, on by 17, it was only 3 inches tall, 2 inches medium, and yeah, I had to raise the hole in the paper. But the doctor's penciled out on a piece of paper, which I don't have. I'd have to look for the scan. But all of the background wasn't there. That was all done after the fact. But yeah, this is sort of where I'm going to go with the more like, I hope I have infinite doctors in the back. Get to that
Breaker 19
part.
We're having technical difficulties.
Well, actually, I won't get to that part.
Blair needs to be rebooted.
Hey, Blair? Blair?
Now you can't hear me? Can't hear me?
You're breaking up a lot. It's I think what's happening is when you're I think when you rotate, it's using a lot of processor. Obviously, it's using a lot of GPU, but it's also probably using a lot of your computers. It's competing with the Hangout, which I know that's part of your process, so that's fine. But
Well,
I'm going to quit out of some other programs just to see if that'll help.
So that may be actually helpful. Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to recite the alphabet and rotate this image.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I don't have to be.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely competing.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. That's your process. So
anything important while I'm rotating, I guess.
Yeah. So
I'll just sit and spin.
There's a lot of
what I was trying to show there. One of the lights to the end of it, which I won't be able to because it's an active thing. And I noticed when it gets printed out, it really separates it from some of the other comics on the shelf as far as it having this texture in the end.
I'm sorry, but it did break up again. I was wondering, actually, would you be willing to just click, if you were to click F5 on your keyboard and refresh the Google Hangout window, and then you'll just have to let yourself back in. So while we take this short break, this is Making Comics Live, demo Q&A, comics coloring in Photoshop with Blair Shedd, acclaimed cover artist for many Titan comics, but in particular, many Doctor Who books, as well as an interior and cover artist for a number of the Doctor Who books that came out from IDW previous to that. And it looks like we've got Blair back, so let's get back to him. Awesome.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Absolutely. Yeah. So the
one thing again.
we'll see how it goes. Yeah. So one thing I noticed here is that in that cover was a lot of color holes, a lot of like very stuff that looks to me like a lot of layers to execute.
Yep. I couldn't tell you how. Oh, well, I closed it. I possibly could have told you. It's usually, my stuff usually ends up around 140, 160 layers.
Do you group layers into layer group folders?
Yeah. Usually, like the figure is one. If they're a bunch of main figures, they're in their own folder. Even if they don't have full bodies, they'll get their own folders. Background pieces are usually separate layers.
So can you flash the layer that is the original sketch for this cover?
Well, I can show you the inks. The sketch isn't part of that.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's okay. I just wanted to recap that the image, the cover as it's going to appear is going to be many multiple doctors. And then,
for this image, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be actually that I might be able to bring up. Hold on. There.
Great. Yeah. So this is where we're going. Is many copies of the same Doctor, infinite Doctors, and then the spheres at the top are actually infinite Earths at the top.
Correct.
Okay. So knowing that this is the outcome, and obviously all of us that are watching know that this is going to be achieved by, pulling and cloning layers and copying and so on, and repositioning and resizing. I mean, that's clear. But what is your first? What's your first step now? Is it to color the main figure? Will it be to block in areas for the multiple figures? What's sort of your process?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to get into. I have to finish opening up all of the palettes and such I'll use. Okay. Let's see. First off, I'm going to need to find my 12th Doctor colors.
So you have a palette for the 12th Doctor himself?
Yes. I have a palette for each of the Doctors I work with because that way it keeps me constantly using the same colors.
Right. So
though this particular Doctor's had a lot of outfit changes, so it's a bit looser right now.
Is any of that a BBC or Titan issue, or is it just strictly for your own purposes to have consistency over the characters?
Mostly my own purposes. They've recommended colors in the past, and they have tweaked colors in the past, but I've never been told it has to be a certain hexadecimal color or a certain Pantone color.
Right.
I mean, they have those, but let's see. for instance. These are the actual Pantone colors for the when they still had multicolored Daleks. These were the Pantone colors for those.
That's awesome.
There's the actual Pantone color for the TARDIS.
That's great.
But you know, I think I used the TARDIS one. Past that, I sort of wing it.
You sort of wing it. Okay.
12th Doctor colors. Here we go. So this is, I actually have this over an old copy, or one of the first drawings I did of the 12th Doctor. And so these are all the colors I use inside that, or on him. Though he's wearing slightly different stuff nowadays, so I kind of wing it. I also will always open up this, which is actually the 9th Doctor's team. But I discovered something when working on this book, that the way I layer on lighting effects and such makes the really blows out the skin and makes everyone way too pale and way too shiny white. So I had to actually dial down my base colors so they're darker. So this is actually what I use for skin tone, and this is what I'm going to be using for clothing colors. And the last thing I open is this right here. It's a texture I got off a line once upon a time called Rock Smooth, and that is a just a rock texture that I apply a watercolor filter to, a specific watercolor filter that I made an action for in Photoshop, and I'll show you how I use that when I get to it.
Okay, great.
So does
that actually produce a kind of dappled skin thing?
Kinda, and I put it over the entire thing. I used to have specific layer or specific textures for hair, for clothing, for whatever, but it got to be so many layers and it took so much time. I now just use the Rock Smooth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to I'll describe this as best I can as I go.
Yeah.
Just going to make sure.
Oh, and by the way, Blair is a Mac. He works in a Mac environment, but you know, any of the particular key commands, if he brings up and says, you know, Apple this or command that, they are going to relate to Control or Alt this or that, right? So
yeah.
If you happen to be in a PC environment and are saying, oh no, he's working in Mac, I can't do these things. No, you absolutely can. And you just need to substitute. I think it's Command for Control and Apple for Alt or something like that. I can't remember what to go for. And it's easier for you to look.
And sometimes my hand is moving fast enough that I don't even know what I'm doing. Quite honestly, it's like tying my shoes. If you ask me to explain it to you, I might not be able to. Okay, so first thing I do is command click on the layer containing the Doctor, create a new layer above it, and the color I usually use is bright green, but I then fill that entire area with a bright green. This is going to serve the purpose of showing me where I haven't colored, or if I have any small areas that didn't get color on them. This will show me that. I also use
the bright green specific. Why that color as opposed to another?
It's easier to see and less likely I'll be using it in the image itself.
So it's actually one of the least likely colors, even if you're using green. So it just automatically becomes
right. If for some reason this was going to be mostly a green image, I might use red.
I see. Right, because it's obviously a contrasting.
Yep.
Opposite.
And so I'm going to lock it off with the little checkerboard that's up top of the... zoom this.
Actually, that's a good question, because I've never really used the checkerboard in the lock area. I've always just used the lock itself. So
well, the lock means you can't do anything to it.
I see.
But so I'm going to be adding color to it, and I might not want to spill over the edge into the white space of the layer.
So that's what the checkerboard does. It's actually saying, do not allow crossing over into the alpha.
Correct.
Oh, I see. See, this is the way to avoid having to right-click on the thumbnail and say select pixels or whatever. It just does that automatically for you.
Yep.
Because that green area is only that green area. It's not that green area filled on white.
Correct.
If you were to turn,
Yeah,
if you were to
'cause
turn off the
actually,
base layer, you'd see the
background. Actually, let me put in. I usually have gray back there just so it's not
right.
white, so I can actually see. Because, like I said, there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff going on back there later. But so yeah, there you go.
And again, I assume that these are all things that you've developed over the years to increase your productivity and reduce confusion while you're working.
Yeah. Can anyone hear me? I think I lost all you guys.
No, we're here.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. It got just really quiet for a second. Okay. Yeah. It's trial and yeah, it was a lot of trial and error. Or if I wanted to do something, I just Google it until I found a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of only colorists do things a lot more efficiently than I do. But if I tried to learn their ways right now, I might confuse myself and become less efficient. So
I know that a lot of pro colorists use channels only, and I've still yet to be able to. I just haven't had time to even like figure that out.
I'm terrible with channels. Yeah.
And I have a feeling
that's how they taught us, but I don't get it.
Yeah.
I'm clumsy.
So now you've done what I would assume to be the universal setup routine starting any particular cover, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would usually work background to foreground as far as layers.
Okay.
But since I only have the one layer, that's why I dropped in gray instead of white. So I'm not staring at that stark white and maybe getting it confused with something in the image. But
if you were, sorry to interrupt, but if you were going to start this as the proper cover, what ideas did you have for that background? Was it going to be a star field or just some sort of?
It probably will be a star field. I do have pre-done star fields that I can drop in because I also have star field brushes that I purchased online. But and a lot of that might get covered up in the end. There's actually a star field in that other 12th Doctor cover that I had open, but you can't see much of it anymore.
Right. But it gives you something to kind of think off of and work off of, right?
Right. This particular one, since it depends on this main figure being done before all the others, it's easy enough to just skip to this one.
Okay.
So the next thing I do, hello.
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 There's a ding. Oh, someone messaged me. That's all.
Okay.
Can you guys hear that ding? Is that coming through, or is that just in my
only only your microphone and what the Hangout is pulling through.
Cool.
Yeah. Yep. So you just sound like somebody who sounds like they're hearing things, but
that's typical. Okay, so
madman, you.
What I have here is just the the black and white lines that I brought over. When I was over in Manga Studio, that thing I was doing when I turned the screen pink was going around making sure there were no holes so I could fill the area with white. So this is basically a paper cutout of that now. So, but now that I have the green back there, I'm actually going to strip out all the white. I already have an action for this, which basically selects, if there is any gray, it makes it all black. It basically, picks a threshold, turns it black and white bitmap, and essentially bitmap, and strips out all the white. So I'm going to do that right now. That's all done. It used to be I would use this dark purple to replace black, but more recently I've been using just black just to see what's different. So now I've got that done. I'm going to turn on the regular lock that you were talking about. So now I can't alter this.
Right.
And I don't want to.
Right, because again, we are in a non-destructive process.
Right. And let me save. Okay, so as Jesse knows, in the past I've used what the heck? Oh, okay. In the past, I've used this. Is it still here?
Mhm.
No, there it is. This filter called Flatten Pro. It's a thing you can buy from B Pelt. I don't know his full name, but it's this program that you can make it fill all of the area between your black lines and then have it flatten it, taking out the black lines, so you're just left with flat colors. But recently, I've just been doing it by hand. So what I'm going to do now is, and I don't have that many regions, is the flat colors. And I'll explain what that is as I do it.
Yeah, if you can explain what flats are as opposed to the full coloring, that would be.
So first, so remembering that these black lines, the actual holding lines, are on one layer, and this green is on a layer below it, and I can't color outside of that green. I'm going to go through and start selecting areas. First, I'm going to do the skin color on the doctor. So that's, a really wide area, but it's approximately where all the skin is. And then I'm just going to use the paint bucket with the skin color I chose and fill it in. So if this were if the rest of him were green and he just had that skin color, those would be the flat colors. So as I'm working on the piece later and adding more layers, at any time I can come in with the magic wand and select those layers. If I just wanted to work on the skin tone, if I just wanted to work on the green, that's all I would need to do. Those colors are all selected, and they're all flat. Some people will even have colors on separate layers. So, for instance, if the hair was one color, I don't bother with that because it's just me. So
I also
now I'm
do
going to do
my flatting the same way. My flatting's all on one layer.
I'm actually going to darken that gray in the background so I can see it.
Are you using the eraser end of your Cintiq pen to do cutting away, or are you? How are you doing that?
I'm just using the lasso tool.
You'll use the lasso tool. Okay. Oh, now I can see. Okay. I had to make my screen bigger so I can see what was going on. I heard a lot of swishing, so I was wondering if you were.
That wasn't me.
That was me.
Oh, okay.
I am fiddle-faddling around at the same time.
Oh, okay, right.
I would like to interject, actually. I never use the eraser end of the Wacom pen. I always just hold E on the keyboard. I'm very much a keyboard person, so I tend to not use like a lot of the buttons on the tablet or any of the other things because I feel like it takes way longer to spin the pen around to erase than it does to just hold the E key down for a second or two.
Agreed. Oh, so you hold the E key down and you get the eraser on the writing end, on the drawing end.
Yep, and then when you let go of E, it goes right back to the last tool as long as you hold the key down. So at least on Photoshop.
That's cool. That's great.
The only issue is that my nibs tend to wear out a lot faster because I never use the other side.
Right.
I once asked for a replacement nib from them, and they sent me like 2 packs, so I don't think I'll ever run out. So I'm okay there. I think I've ever, over the course of 3 Cintiqs, ever used 3 nibs. Oh, there we go.
The Intuoses tend to be a lot rougher, especially since the 4, so they wear out a lot faster. At least in my experience, but I probably also have Hulk hands, so there's that.
I tend to really, well, if I'm working traditionally, I tend to really punish the pencils or pens or whatever I'm using. I press down way too hard. I try not to do that digitally. One, because there's really no use. I mean, yeah, this is pressure sensitive, but I don't actually have to carve a hole in it. And 2, because I don't want to carve a hole in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of refreshing to see somebody use a polygonal lasso, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't even select the polygonal lasso. I select the regular round one and then hold down Option. Oops, hold down Option, because then you can do curves and then go to geometric and then back to curve.
So allows
and
you to
then
flip
geometric
back and
again.
forth.
Yep, and you just have to, on and off of Option to get that.
So in the live chat, I assume it's a question from somebody named Jaglife saying, "Can you draw names?" And I'm not sure how to answer that question, but I'm just going to feed you that question.
Can I draw names?
Yes, Blair. Can you do that? I'm not like making fun. I just don't know what that means. So maybe that's
is that
cool.
I can
for something.
I can write names. I guess I can make bubble letters like I learned in second or third grade. As for drawing names, that sounds more like oh geez, who wrote that story? The scapegoat.
I don't know.
The Lottery. That's the name of that short story where they drew a name.
Shirley Jackson.
Yes, there we go.
Oh, that kind of drawing names. Like
are we drawing names tonight?
Out of a hat, yeah, or out of a yeah.
Yeah.
Is that if you could clarify your question, Jaglife, then I'd be happy to pass that along. So what you're doing? So you're now you're flatting. Flatting. Could you explain to people who aren't aware what that means in terms of the coloring process?
It's literally it's the base of the color. I mean, once upon a time, all the color in oh boy, that looks creepy. All the color in comics was done with the stuff called amberlith. You would cut color.
Yeah.
Amberlith is terrible. It sticks to everything. I probably still have some in my system somewhere.
Yeah.
I probably still have some in the office somewhere. But you would cut color, and that's how you would actually physically cut it out with X-Acto knives, with scissors, what have you. And that's how you got color in comic books. Nowadays, when people are working digitally, they like to have a lot more than just the straight colors or maybe one color of shade on top of that. So there are these flat colors that are put in so you can select certain areas and isolate certain areas. Or if on the fly, you get a note from your editor saying, no, the doctor's hair is blue.
Right.
You can just change it by selecting it and clicking it.
Selecting the flat area and then doing and then also some people will use that as just the base sort of underpainting of doing more intricate coloring of that shape, right? That's another usage for flats, I would assume. Okay, so Jaglife actually just explained what he was asking. He meant like graffiti. Like, do you ever do graffiti? Do you ever do graph names, like drawing? That kind of thing?
Not professionally. I've done it as backgrounds for like if I have a comic set on a city street and I need something in the background to make it look more authentic, I'll do stuff like that. But
so you've done your own. You don't like steal them for photos or something.
No. Cool. There's no use in that. Plus, it's more fun to do your own because you can hide friends' names in it or references to things. But outside of that, I don't really do anything.
Have you done, or do you, I mean, I would imagine it's a time problem really more than anything, but do you have any goals to maybe do pure fine art or maybe sculpture or environmental art or just like stuff that's really out of your wheelhouse in the future?
Oh, I'd like to mess with everything if I had the time and resources. I'm not sure if I ever see myself doing that. Not because I won't want to, but I probably just won't ever have the time. Comics isn't known for its retirement plan.
Right, exactly. If you did have the time, however, is there something like, oh, I'd really love to paint nature, I'd love to do plein air painting, or I'd love to do sculpture, or
I would do statue. I'd probably work with sculpture a little bit.
Yeah.
More like molding clay than chipping at granite. Or I do more traditional paint. Well, it'd probably end up being kind of abstract painting.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Now you are taking you're taking an old set of flats and you're taking your color charts and making your flats by selecting the color off of those and bringing it over. Is that right?
Yeah. And when I developed this one for the Ninth Doctor, I mean, this is broken down into, what each color actually represents: skin, hair, eyebrows, eyes, lips. And I keep this one because I know what it'll look like after I add all the other layers on top of it. So there's safety in that, that I know I'm not going to get an overly pale character, or that their skin's going to look overly dark, or that it'll change hue completely.
So, can you explain a little bit about that? Like, I think a lot of new artists, people that don't understand or haven't, gotten advanced enough to have a workflow or whatever, why is something like that so critical? And obviously you said a little bit, but could you expand a little?
Because you, especially if you're working for someone else, you want to know what things are going to look like when they're done. And even then, it can be a little, okay, a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Hit or miss until you actually see a printed product as far as what things are going to look like. Past that, I don't know.
No, I think
you're asking me questions I don't think about.
That's all right. That's good. It's good to think once in a while.
It hurts. It hurts.
Now, how long? I mean, because obviously this is a particular cover that is probably is, well, I don't know, actually. I can't presume that it's going to take the same amount of time, but it might take a little less time because you have the one figure that you need to get grind through and then replicate, and then you have the one earth to, and then obviously there's going to be a lot of layers of sort of atmospheric stuff to bind it all together, glue it all together. But in general, like, the previous cover you showed us, and I know that there are other covers you do where there'll be maybe 2 to 3 or even 4 figures or something, different elements. Generally, how long does it take to get through a cover from, I won't say the sketch part, because the sketch part is so ephemeral and it could be who knows what. But like when you're actually you've got the sketch, now you've started to draw. So from drawing to completed cover.
10 to 15 hours. I mean, it could be more depending on the amount of figures. Yeah, like you mentioned, amount of important figures, because then you got to get everyone to fit into the place or what have you. And though my quickest was a Ninth Doctor cover where I used a pre-existing background and it was a single figure, and I managed to do the whole thing in 2 hours. I have yet to come close to that, though.
Now, you could spend, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, because I don't know when the deadlines are when you say you're doing it in 15 hours, how that cuts close to when they need it for print. But I mean, conceivably, you could spend more time, but if you spent more time, you're making less per hour doing the cover.
Oops. Correct.
So can you explain a little bit about why you are trying to get that cover done? I mean, obviously, as fast as possible is always great, but in other words, like, why are you in that 15-hour zone?
I'm not paid hourly, and I'm not paid salary. I'm paid per cover. I get one rate per cover, and I get one rate per interior image. And I can also I have the option at any time. I can get one of their colorists to color anything I draw. So I can do that, but then they pay me less because they're not paying me to color the piece. So hence I color it myself. Whoops. Lost my
because
reference.
You're not in a contract where you're just getting paid to be Blair Shedd. Each cover you're getting paid to be Blair Shedd, drawing guy, and then the coloring guy, and if you were out of your mind, the lettering person as well.
Well, as we all know,
you would get paid for each of those things.
When we work on our own indie stuff, we are those guys.
Yeah,
we're all of those guys, and we're out of our mind.
Right, we are out of our exactly. Like one of the things that I'm looking at for consecutive things with my own projects is figuring out where I can at least get some money together to pay a decent, I mean, not like an indie rate, but like a decent indie rate to pay a proper letterer,
Yeah,
to just do
something I'm going
part
to do
of it
too.
offline. But at any rate, yeah, I mean, that's how pro comics work is, at least in the United States, I would say, is that, each job is its own fee and can be done by individual creative people who do just inking, lettering, coloring, etc. If you want to make more money, and we all do, I think, then one has to take
sure,
on
why not?
more of those, sure. Then one has to take on those individual jobs, because again, as some people may or may not know who are watching, at least in American industry comics, and I know that Titan is a UK company, but they're basically paying, I think, a fee schedule that is representative of what Americans get for
essentially.
North Americans get. North Americans and specifically United States North Americans don't get as high page rates, as let's say European or I think Asian creators do. For standard page rates, I think our standard page rates are lower, at least for journeymen, who are, journeyman artists. I think when you get into superstars, their demand rates are infinitely higher,
and
but it's just a different deal.
Yeah, and I mean the at least in American comics, the coveted thing now is the exclusive, be it DC or Marvel, and other companies do them now too. But I mean, I think health insurance comes with it, which I'm lucky enough in an estate. I'm in Vermont. I'm lucky enough that as a freelancer, I'm not screwed in that respect. I have freelancer friends in other states who they're just paying out the nose because it's just awful for them.
Don't get sick.
Right, basically. So that's one reason people go after exclusives too. The exclusives usually say that you get so much work a year, which as a freelancer, you're not guaranteed that at all. Right. You might do 4 issues in a row, but after that, you might not work until the next year.
Right. That's where a contract becomes like a coveted goal.
Yeah.
So can you explain what you've just done with the eye area? I noticed that we got a couple of puffs, like puff kind of color.
With Peter Capaldi, just for age and intensity, I like to add a little bit of rosiness around his eyes. Most of that gets lost a bit later when I'm doing it. I selected just the skin area. I created a new layer, and I used the gradient tool with a certain color pink. Okay. And I set the layer to multiply so it came out darker, and then I turned the opacity down so it wasn't as bright. And I just realized I forgot something over here.
Because I know that some people might actually just get a brush and really tweak down the opacity or the fill of the brush and make like almost like a puff powder kind of brush, and then just tap it in a couple of times until it came together.
I used to be really accurate about those, but then I would look at the final result, and you couldn't tell most of the time.
So the pulling a like dragging out a gradient is totally sufficient for your needs.
For this, yeah. If it were, I've done it a few times where women have had sort of in their makeup have had rosy cheeks, and they've actually placed that on there. Those I might shape a bit more, so they're not just these big red welt areas. But since the eyes are essentially, and the orbits are essentially circular, it's not as much of a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm done with the flats here. So I'll zoom back in and show everyone what that looks like. It looks terrifying, is what it looks like.
That's right. All flats always look really scary and weird.
Yeah, that's a special one. Anyway, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go get that rock smooth texture. I'm going to copy that whole thing, and I'm just going to start pasting it over the top of the flats.
Oh, is that a seamless texture?
It is not a seamless texture. I could make it one simply by using the where is it? The image align feature wherever that went.
I thought you were going to say the seamless texture, the seamless texture filter. You know?
There was one, but what I do to it next usually renders that moot.
Okay.
Which is
I can see, blocks and distinction between
the next thing I do is I apply this watercolor filter. It is the watercolor paint filter, but with a few tweaks ahead of time.
So you said you made an action. Yeah, so that's gotten rid of any traces of any of that.
Yeah, that first Gaussian blurs it a bit, and then watercolors.
Oh, right. So it's completely rendered.
And then I missed a spot.
Interesting.
Hold on.
Well, there's always Control T and stretch it out a little, right?
Yeah. I actually don't like to stretch it because it distorts the texture.
Oh, right.
The little cells of the texture start to get larger, and you go from this really subtle texture to people having like lizard scales.
Gotcha.
Okay. And what I usually do next is command click on the flats, select the inverse of that, and delete it. So now I just have a shape of the texture. I then set it to hard light. And this is hard light 100%, so you see that's a bit strong. Yeah. And so I usually turn it down to about 10 or 15, depending. Might do 10 on this.
Okay, right. So it's just enough so that you see some wavering model. There's some modeling going on, and I say like MOTTL modeling, and a little bit of what you want in skin, because skin is not a flat color. It's actually different translucencies of stuff. Right?
And depending on the character, I think this is okay where it is. I might sometimes turn it up as far. I have it on 13. I might turn it up as high as 15. If I have a really old, decrepit character, I might turn it up as high as 20. If I have
ask you about that,
if I have like a very soft female face, I might turn it down to 5. Right. But I always have something there. And clothing, I usually keep at about the same, so it's all very uniform and it's less work for me to do.
Can in the final shrunk, like, because obviously you're working larger. Well, no, you may be working at size, but I mean, like, by the time it gets printed and everything, would a 5% of that texture actually show? Does it actually show in the color? Do you see?
It depends. On some of the lighter areas, yeah, and it also depends on how the final lighting goes on it.
I see. Okay, because I was wondering how much of it washes out or whatever.
Well, I'm going to open up one of these other. Oops. There we go.
Yeah, and maybe if you have a flat one, that might help your bandwidth sort of computer.
Yeah, there. This is actually smaller than actual, but let me go to 100% on this JPEG.
Really,
you can see a bit of it in the cheeks, and I have it much higher in the floor, and I have it much higher on the blue leather on their legs and on the alien faces and on the teeth. But he's probably got a 10 or 15 on him, so you can still see it a little bit. And this is after I've put a noise filter on the whole thing.
Oh, you do that as well?
Yeah.
Noise filter above everything or just above the color?
When everything's flattened, I go to filter, add noise.
Oh, you do?
And I usually no more than 7.
Right. What is that? Is that a textural thing, or is it more like? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it takes a little bit out. Because more often than not, things digitally colored look digitally colored. Because it's all very smooth and such, and you have to go to great lengths to make it not look smooth.
Yes. Because
these were designed to be smooth, and by adding a bit of noise, it can sort of come off as mixed media at times.
Yeah, for sure.
Like this could be paper grain for all you know, or something like that.
Right. And again, when we're talking about verisimilitude and realism, we're not always talking about the degree of realism of the anatomy or structures. Sometimes verisimilitude and realism pertains to a kind of textural appearance of the illustration itself. In essence, it's a kind of a meta realism, right? Like we're trying to achieve textural tropes that mimic things that would have happened had you illustrated it on paper, canvas, or whatever, so that it's responded to as more organic look, right?
Yeah.
I find that not a excuse me. I find that there's a lot of artists who are actually even very accomplished, both in comics and other arenas, who work digitally, who have not sort of gone there yet and are not thinking in those terms, and that's why the work still, quote, looks digital or something. There's something. Yeah. It is, it's sort of like there's this missing X factor, and I think that's the X factor that's missing in that kind of work.
So let's see. I think the next. Okay, yeah, I think I can move on to the next bit, which is selecting it again, creating a new layer, and I'm going to fill it with this purple that I use.
So you have a very specific color of purple that
you use. This is the purple I use for all shadows.
Oh, I see.
But I also set it to multiply. So it's made the whole thing dark. But the thing I do now is is I start carving out the brightest lights.
I would say that, or I don't know if the other guys want to pipe in, but to me, I can already see where this is now looking much more like a Blair Shedd coloring, like that. Just that application of the purple layer, and now
cool.
I'm seeing.
So I can stop now.
That's right.
Thanks.
I think you can.
It's done here.
I think you're done.
Done here.
Drop the mic.
Stylus drop.
I can't find the stylus. But anyway, let me bring in my reference shot that I was mentioning. Oh wait, you guys can see that, can't you?
Yes, we can.
Because I'm just sharing the desktop anyway, or the screen anyway. Yeah. So this is the lighting I want. It's not a very clear picture. It's slightly blurry, but it's more about the shadows. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the lasso tool and go through and scoop out these areas on the purple. So we'll see the actual color beneath it.
I see.
2, for instance. And we'll try that again.
Actually, on YouTube. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, it's the delay. Pardon me. Never mind. So you're using that as a guide of where to pull those lights out.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, here's a question. This may be completely ridiculous, but since you do happen to have these photos of this model, right, the toy, or you could use photos of him for, you could try to, find a very similar facial, like a photo from not just even Doctor Who. It could be from the other show he did previous to Doctor Who. That, have you ever considered actually tracing structures from, I forgot his name again, the actor.
Capaldi.
Yeah. Actually tracing it from a photo and then bringing those selections over to the drawing.
Yeah. Sometimes I will do that, mostly for proportion, right. Not for every line placement, but and a lot of people are like, oh, you just trace that. Yeah, but if you give anyone a pencil, a piece of paper, or tracing paper and say, trace this drawing, I guarantee you it's not going to look very good unless they know what they're doing.
No, you still are basically causing a very, very specific fusion of what the artist does originally and what the photo provides in terms of basic accuracy.
Correct.
And the thing is too, I mean, a lot of this has come up because of the internet and the unfortunate. One of the unfortunate parts of the internet is that many people in the world feel like their opinion is of equal value as others, which is not exactly true, particularly when we're dealing with skilled labor of any kind. It turns out actually there's a lot of folks who don't even know what they're talking about before they make a lot of judgment calls. And even if we go back to Rockwell, and even previous to Rockwell, certainly all of them were using photo reference. Larry Bama used photo reference.
Oh yeah, and they were catching flack for that too.
So they actually made a lot of money for models because they employed a lot of models, thank God, and gave them money. So like this whole notion of, and Neil Adams put it even more eloquently. Unfortunately, the way he puts it has got a lot of New York sass and maybe a few words I shouldn't repeat. So, but basically, I think it's true that like people who talk about this sort of photo reference or photo models or whatever really just don't understand the entire history of illustration, period.
Yeah.
So,
and
the other thing too is that it seems to me that if you didn't attempt to bring that verisimilitude, that accuracy, then you'd be blamed for not being on model.
Correct. You really can't win, is what it comes down to. Yeah. That's what I've discovered over and over. Yeah. But I mean, as far as photos, I try not to grab, or I try not to reference, trace, whatever you want to call it, pictures in whole, or else you just get this weird photo story instead of an actual series of drawings.
Yeah, which is the sort of like the opposite problem, right? Which is you see comics all the time or paintings, Star Wars, Star Trek, other properties where it's very clear. Like if you were really good, you'd actually know what episode or movie that particular Luke Skywalker head comes from or something, right?
Right.
That's
right.
And that's
because
the other.
That's all they. I mean, and that's all I got to work with, and especially with Doctor Who, I try to avoid it. But they have certain doctors. There's only so many reference photos that are taken, and so you get a lot of people drawing the same scene or the same pose, and you're like, well, that's reference photo number 34. And even if you don't know that's reference photo number 34, you've probably seen it online anyway because it was used in a promo or what have you.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I'll use the photo reference, but I won't exactly use it because I don't want people sitting there going, oh yeah, it's that face or it's that look.
Right.
It always drives me nuts when I see, kind of off topic but sort of on topic, when I see people at conventions doing like sketches for people and they're just using a pose from a character that is like the same pose that character has had 100 times over, like Invader Zim, for example, like doing like a commanding, like arms out kind of thing. It's just, I always like to try to find a different way to pose the character, usually.
I mean, if someone asks me to draw Wolverine, I'm usually going to give them Wolverine with his claws in front of his face, or something like that, because that's what Wolverine does. Every once in a while, I'll get an oddball request, and those are the fun ones. Can you draw Wolverine with a cat? Okay. And then that's when I'll break the mold with those, because you know they want something fun, and they're not just going to turn to eBay and try to sell it. They actually they have a theme. I love theme sketchbooks when people are like, yes, everyone in here, I want everyone to draw Thor on a tricycle.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, you'll look through this book and you'll be sketch number 34, and right before you is Alex Ross, who's drawn Thor on a bicycle, and you're like, this is incredible, and I can't keep it. But I love those are the books I love. And I also love when people ask for characters. I mean, I like drawing Spider-Man, Batman, obviously Doctor Who, but when they ask for characters like the Shadow, love that. Because who asks for the Shadow anymore?
There's a few.
There need to be more.
Well,
I love the Shadow.
Yeah, no, I agree. So you're basically you're doing a subtractive method to achieve your lights. A lot of people, I think, would, especially starting out, but even a lot of folks who are very experienced, I think tend to think the opposite. They tend to think what I would consider to be a traditional method, which would be to, fill in a color, fill in the base flesh color, and then add shadows, right? Even if whether they were digitally painting or whatever they were doing, right? You do.
That's how I started. Yeah, and that's how I started. But I found that I would nail it better if I subtracted rather than added. That if the whole thing were purple to begin with, it was much easier to go through, or shadowed to begin with, it'd be much easier to go through and take away the light rather than add the shadow.
It definitely provides, it definitely achieves the effect, I think, much more dynamically, because it really is light hitting things rather than, it looks like light is hitting surfaces.
Shadow.
Right.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Because shadow is the default, in a sense, of all things. Light breaks through the shadow, not the other way around. So it actually makes an awful lot of sense to be mimicking that in terms of how you're doing this.
When I do acrylic painting, I don't do as often nowadays, but when I do acrylic painting, I will work dark to light as well,
which
can be tricky.
Standard, yeah, that's your standard painting technique, is underpainting dark.
But not except for like watercolor where you don't. But acrylic, I always work dark to light. So I've sort of brought that into Photoshop.
It definitely assists this. It definitely helps your objective to achieve what you're saying was like as little digital look as possible, or at least to have an organic digital look. I think that's part of what helps that happen clearly.
There's another step after this that, of course, I'll get to, but that I've added sort of recently, maybe in the past half year, because I would do it just like this at first. By the way, now that I'm outside of the face,
we have, by the way, doubled our viewership.
At 4?
We are 5.
Oh, 5.
There were only 2.5.
2.5 people on it?
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, there were 5, but now there's 4. So I guess somebody popped in for a second. And we have our first like, which is amazing.
Woohoo!
That's great. Thank you for liking, whoever you are. By the way, just so that I can, we've been going for a while. Just want to interject that this is Making Comics Live demo Q&A. We're Vermont comic creators, and I'm Greg Giordano, your moderator. But our star and artist that we are blessed with for the moment is Blair Shedd, artist for Titan Comics and previously IDW Comics franchises for Doctor Who, but also Titan Comics, Robotech, Warhammer, Assassin's Creed, Sherlock, and Telepathetic, that he does the full book for inside and out for the Henry Farms Sitcom Comics Company. And he's teaching us, actually gave us a lot of the initial process in drawing or inking, however you want to call it, in Manga Studio, and now we're into Photoshop for the final color.
So now I'm pretty much happy with that, and it looks a little less creepy without that.
But also, I would say not laboring on the shapes. It seems to me you're not over laboring this first wave of light cuts.
Oh, yeah, no, not really. That's as accurate as I'm going to get it. I mean, I am about to fudge it a bit, but as far as the initial stage, that's plenty accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, at this point, it even looks a bit cell shaded.
It does, actually, yeah.
But I am going to take it further. So what I've been doing is I've been using the plain old pencil and the plain old eraser with different size brushes and different opacities, usually something low, like a 3, 1, 2, or 3, or 30%, 10%, 20%, or 30%. That's what I meant to say.
What style of brush?
Just a hard round.
Just the simple out of the box Photoshop hard round.
Yep. And then I just start going through and softening some of those lines depending on my lighting reference.
Okay.
And I'm just constantly hitting the keyboard to adjust the opacity as I go.
How do you adjust opacity via the keyboard?
You just hit the number keys, 1, 2, or 3. So 10% is just 1, 20% is 2. But if I want something specific, like 12%, I would hit 1, 2 really quick.
I see. Sorry, I didn't hear you when you first said that. Well, that's interesting. So zooming out.
I don't think I did.
Oh, okay. So zooming out even halfway, roughly, it's even what you're doing is achieving a lot of modeling on the shapes.
Yeah, and I don't have to mess with anti-alias brushes and the like. And if I need to correct something, I just take a pencil, the pencil tool, with 20 or 30 percent as far as the opacity goes, and that same shadow purple color, and then just fix whatever I need to. Or I'm going to add a little. Oops, that's the wrong brush. There we go. If I'm adding to areas a little bit too.
So you're going back and forth. You're subtracting, adding, subtracting, adding. Now, would you ever consider doing the exact same technique, but instead of doing it on the actual purple layer, making a mask on the purple layer and then cutting and adding and subtracting from a mask?
I could. It just sounds like more work.
The only reason I ask is because then if there was some major screw up, you could easily, put that chunk back in and.
I mean, the other thing I could do is just, I could save this as a mask, or I could just duplicate it and lock one down and hide it.
Right.
That'd be the quick and dirty version.
Yeah. Ultimately, how much do you want to take away that hard edge at this before you get
it just depends on what it looks like in the photo reference I'm using. Like over here on this eye, that's a bit sharper than this here, so I'll dumb that down a bit.
But with like the outer, and it's obviously the left side of his face, but our camera right side of his face, that whole edge, is that an edge that you would want to keep harsh, or is it going to soften down?
Yeah, I'm going to soften parts of it. I'm just working on whatever my eye falls on at the time.
Yeah, right. I just was wondering if there are situations in which human skin you would leave a completely crisp edge, and situations where you would want to back it down.
If the lighting were much more extreme, like a open flame or a flashlight or something, those might be times when I would leave a lot more hard edges. Or I found that, and this is why I started doing this, if I leave those hard edges on and then start putting on the highlight layers on top of it, sometimes it can make people look wet, either sweaty or just came in from the rain. So that might be another reason I would leave that.
Although the opposite is true, that if you wanted to achieve the look of, let's say, somebody standing in the rain at night with lots of neon city signs and stuff, that might be a way to achieve that effect.
Right.
How much do you think about, and you may not because you may not have the time, literally, but how much do you think about the reflective light sources? And, in other words, like the light that's bouncing off he's in space maybe or something, so it doesn't apply, but, if they were in a city or if they were in a polished marble room, do you think about light that's bouncing rather than only the direct light sources?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that comes up a lot. I mean, this is an 11th Doctor cover I did recently. And as you can see, we've got red lighting here. We got green lighting over here. I've had other ones where there'd also be like maybe a blue rim light around the edges up here. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely come up. And I do like when things do that. And who knows, I might put a bit of light blue edge lighting on this too when I get to it.
Yeah, because I know that like it's not like you have an infinite amount of time. So I would imagine you have to prioritize even things like that in your head while you're working, right?
I found cheats to it. They might not be. I think this goes back to the whole. It might not be right, but it looks right.
Yeah.
So there are ways that I can fudge that later on if I want to, and they vary depending on the circumstance. Oh yeah, and one of the thing I was saying before, kind of like some of the old masters, I'll put most of my work in to the faces, and then we get to the other parts of their body or background. It gets a lot looser. Like, I mean, I made all these careful cuts up in his face, but then when I get down here, it's just some very broad cuts, and I'm not going to be as diligent with smoothing it out with the eraser either.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually never hear anybody refer to those methods, and it seems like modern industry comics do not follow that scheme much.
Yeah,
I mean, some do, but not many. Most of them are laboriously detailed in every single picture plane. And
hey, I would love to do that, but I just don't have the time.
But I mean, I think it's actually counterproductive to a truly evocative illustration. It's not, like all you got to do is go back to Wyeth. I mean, if Wyeth executed the same detail on the pirate ship, a mile off in the background as he did in the foreground, you wouldn't have these majestic pictures from the Illustrated Treasure Island or whatever. It just
also it'd probably go super insane, scream all the time.
Right, and
it's not fun.
It's not fun, but it's also ultimately, even if it's only a subconscious pleasure, it's not fun for the reader.
Subconscious pleasure.
I'm gonna have to put that in the show notes and in the tag.
You're in subconscious pleasure. I don't know what that is. I want that.
But
actually, it's fun.
That's. Do you ever think? Do you think about that kind of stuff? I mean, do you consider like, well, people aren't going to look at this part of this drawing, or people aren't going to look. Do you consider those things?
My wife will yell at me about that sometimes too, because I am known to get really technical with the backgrounds, parts that'll either get covered over by a figure or will never be seen.
Yeah.
Just by their very nature, it'll be cut off in the process, and I should probably think about it more, quite honestly.
But honestly, like also, it's just the case that like the time factor of that people dedicate to an individual image is seconds, or it's actually parts of seconds, fractions of seconds. So it's not an excuse to not do things well or not do them, with some accuracy or consistency. But it is true that one can leave things out, and one can emphasize and de-emphasize and prioritize images within the frame or the page, right, or the cover, right. Although a cover artist's job is a bit less forgiving, right, because you have to sell the book, and you're also everybody says, well, it's just one picture, you got to get it right, like
it's the old you can't judge a book by its cover. What are you talking about? That's exactly what the cover is for.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I also used to laugh as soon as I learned this, but one of those common requests that like Marvel and DC get are, hey, you should hire me because I totally will draw covers for you, and thinking that that's like a job they have, like an entry-level position is drawing a cover. That's like, you should totally hire me to design your car because you have plenty of other people who will do the insides.
Yeah, the important
I'm just
stuff.
doing the outside. Yeah. And it's not. It's actually kind of a dream job because you get paid, on average, you get paid more than the interior guys, even if you are the interior guy, and you're doing on the whole, less work because I'm not drawing 16 panels or even 5 panels on this cover.
Right.
Even if it is like 10 people fighting, I'm just drawing that once. I'm not drawing the 10 people fighting over the course of a page.
But ultimately, it's extremely important because if there's not an interesting cover, then there's no reason for you to go over to the rack, pick up the book, and leaf through it. Or in more like severe cases, no reason to buy it, to pre-order it from a catalog, where you don't even get a chance to leaf through it.
Yeah. And now I'm responsible. I'm one of those people that I used to hate as a kid, where I'd be like, "That's an awesome cover," and you buy the comic and they didn't draw the interiors.
Right.
So you're left with awesome cover.
Hey, when it happens.
Yeah. Especially even now in Comixology, I'll look for artists that I enjoy, and I'll be like, "Oh, they worked on that? Oh, they just drew the cover."
They just drew the cover.
Yeah. So now that's my first layer of shadows. I can. Yeah. So no,
you're done. You're done, and you can drop your pen.
Yeah, I'm going to drop my pen again. That's twice today.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
Oh, thank you. Be sure to tip your waiter. Try the veal. It's extra cruel. So the next step is I create another layer again. Yeah. I have set it to soft light, still at 100% opacity.
Sensing.
I select that thing again. I select that whole image again, and I have this sort of off-whitish yellow. I don't know what you would call it. This color here.
Cream color, maybe.
Yeah, and this is going to be my major light source, and I'm going to have the gradient tool, just a circle tool, and so I have this sort of coming straight at him, but I'm going to put a little bit up here, and then I'm going to break it down to about 50%. I'll put a little there, a little there, and maybe 30% on the chest and hood. There. So that's one layer of light. So I lock that off. Then I do another layer, soft light again. But this is where I start to do this. I go back to the pencil tool. I find a size that is there we go. And starting at about 70% with that same yellowish color, I start laying in big chunks of light again. So this is going back to the photo reference and finding where these more concentrated bits of light are.
Right. And obviously we're talking about Peter Capaldi's actual facial structures and where the light hits his particular parts of his face.
I mean, like I said, I have those generic lighting models, but if someone has a more unique face like Capaldi or what have you, then you either have to fake it, or it's usually better to get as much reference as you can. Even if the lighting's not the same, if you can figure out the shape of their face, that's a lot of the battle.
Now these are not, however, the final highlights, right?
No. These are just sort of what I actually have described this as sort of women who contour their makeup. I'm doing the same thing. They'll put in points and then start spreading it out, and that's what I'm doing.
Right.
So I'm picking all these points. I'll start with the face.
Yeah.
So I have that
focus of the
70%, and now I'm going to drop it down to 20. Maybe make it a bit bigger, 20 or 30, and then I'm just going to start. Still using the pencil tool, bringing it out.
Right.
And I occasionally might switch back to the eraser if I think I've overdone it.
And you'll know you overdid it because suddenly it goes flat, right?
Yeah, or he'll just look too shiny, or I'll have I couldn't just leave this shape like this. That's just too much.
The upper lip sort of flanking here.
So I'll dull the edges of that a little bit, and then maybe come back through with the 20 and bring that back up. And this is also the opportunity to put some of the bounce light in.
Now, would having had done the background previous to anything assist you in picking other colors for light?
Yeah, because that would help me break up. Like if the background, the space background, were say sort of a purplish hue, I might not want to. I might want to make, or if it was a cooler color, I might want to make the lights up front a lot warmer, or vice versa.
So right now, this is going to be, I don't know if this is going to be the actual cover or not, but I mean, if this is how you were working, you'd be flying. This is like flying blind against your normal process, right? A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I have an idea in my head, but we'll see how it goes. Right. Book of British Smiles.
You also said that you have been going away from color holds instead of black, and just using black line now. Has that that must have radically altered how you do a lot of this stuff, right?
Sorta. I mean, it's mostly about the final product. But a lot of the time, I was finding where I replaced the black lines with sort of a purplish line, they would come off very washed out in the end. And I wasn't liking that. And so I started adding partial black back in, and I still didn't like that. So I've just gone back to black, so to speak.
You know what they say about that, right?
Once you go black, you find that your covers come out brighter.
Exactly.
I'm doing Robotech action figure covers, and those are the only times I'll still use purple to differentiate. Everyone's getting exit stuff today. To differentiate between shut up, you. Oh, that's because that's not in Photoshop. Hold on. Photoshop. To differentiate between the action figure, this was colored with purple lines, and the printed, quote unquote, printed drawing, which was done in black. So that sets it off from, because this whole area is supposed to look, quote unquote, real, while this is supposed to be printed. So that's somewhere I still definitely use the purple. Oh, yeah. Just if I turn it up a little bit, then I can see it. Okay. Supposed to look shocked or worried, but I'm also getting a vibe of, oh, not lasagna again. That's 3 nights in a row. Okay, so, and like I said, I didn't do too much down here in the way of light rendering, so you can see. Yeah, let's back up there just to get to this point. Flats, there are the lines. The texture, shadow 1, general light, more specific light. Then I reselect the shadow layer.
Oh, okay.
And I create another multiply layer at about between 50 to 70% opacity. And I go and get that purple again. And looking at the photo reference, I start to make certain areas darker that might have gotten too light in the previous process.
Oh, I see.
So under his eyes, maybe a little bit here, up in the hair, a little down in this area here.
It also, I would imagine, allows for you to kind of go with a quick pass with maybe a large brush.
Yeah. Did I? Oh, I locked it too soon. Okay. I'll just make sure that. Okay, good. Okay, so then I do. This is depending on the image. Usually, I'll do it on something like a cover, but I do another highlight layer. This time, I set it to screen. So these are going to come out really bright, and I pick my highlight color. Again, that off-white eggshell color. And I set the opacity to no more than 80%. And this is where you get the non-white highest highlight. So, you know, if someone's getting a really bright white light in their face, there'd be another layer after this. But looking at my reference, there's a touch of stuff. It's here. That is black. That's not going to work. Let me try that again. There we go. Here. Over into the eye.
Tell me just a very specific thing. What's the secret of, because you happen to do it really well, the secret of coloring eyes?
I don't know. That's actually changed for me a few times. Because I used to put in actual eye textures to bring out that texture. Now I just do this sort of scribbling on the inside. It's mostly about paying attention to the reference. To see that
it's almost like
eyes aren't always bright and shiny.
Right, right. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that was it.
It's like because they have the glassy, wet, or you know, they look like round objects that are translucent and have, you know, jelly or the luminescence because of the different wetnesses and the little blobs of reflection in them and so forth. It just seems like you've gotten a kind of a pattern down about how to bring that out in as few passes as you can.
The line straight across his face. There we go. Don't want that. Hold down the button too long. Yeah, that's just paying attention to the reference. Sometimes going above and beyond the reference. Oh, his hair. His hair is going to have highlights in it. Oh. What's happening? Oh, turned down the opacity too much. 5 there. Oh, and I also changed this to from lighten to screen. Oh man. Okay, so I have to do that again. For some reason it was on the wrong setting. Redo the highlights because I had it on the wrong setting, which is why they weren't really showing up. All right, let me.
What setting were they on?
They were on lighten, so they barely were showing up. They should be a lot brighter, and now they are.
Now they are.
So then when I turned it back to screen, they were really, really bright. Okay.
Like paper cutouts or something.
Yeah.
What you're using for, again, if folks are not familiar with Photoshop, if you were to look on the right-hand side of the screen of his Photoshop area, on the bottom right you see layers, and above all those layers there's a small box, and you see the word screen in it. That section is the layer blending mode tab, and there are various different layer blending modes, and screen is one of them. So it's pretty safe to say that your method is very much a painterly method.
It's become that. I mean, I used to use the lasso tool to section off areas and then do gradients inside of those areas, and I just found myself working more and more with the pencil tool or brush tool, and yeah, I decided that basically after the shadow, there was really no reason for the lasso tool anymore. That I'd rather go in and just hand move the color myself, so to speak.
Right. Now, if you were doing an issue of Doctor Who, interiors, I mean, would this method get in the way of speed?
Yes,
it did. Each panel.
It did. I tried that, and it definitely did. And if I ever do interiors again, I will definitely be getting a different color. I mean, I might still do my own covers, but I'd be getting a different colorist. It was just too much of a delay. Because once again, I am a professional person doing colors, but I don't consider myself a professional colorist, if that makes any sense. Like, I wouldn't let anyone hire me just to color something.
Interesting.
I trust myself to color me, but I don't trust myself to color others.
Have you ever tried?
Yeah, but you know, they take just as long, and I'm pretty sure other colorists can do it a lot faster.
Right.
So the last thing I'm going to do here on this particular section is I'm going to create a layer above the lines, and I'm just going to leave it on normal, and I'm going to get a brush out, correct size, and I'm going to put the highlight in his eye finally.
Okay.
I leave that for last now. If I were drawing this for someone else to color, I'd actually draw in the highlight back when, but now when I know I'm coloring it myself, I'll leave it to last. That way it can look a bit more painterly like that. Yeah. All right, so if like we said, this isn't the end because there's a bunch more that goes on, but I'm just going to actually, I'll quickly throw in a background just so I can show you the whole process.
Yeah.
That's not it. Shouldn't get that there. This is a bunch of space background and floating asteroid rock things that I did in the Ninth Doctor series, so I saved that.
Right.
Okay, so now he has a background. That is clashing a bit, so I'm just going to throw something over it. Or actually, I already have something under it, so maybe I'll just turn down the opacity on that. And maybe I'll throw sort of a halo around that.
Will you use adjustment layers for, hue, saturation, or whatever? So just to be able to focus.
Yeah, as needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to combine all these layers. I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to flatten them.
Yep. And
I'm going to do exactly what you were just talking about. I'm actually going to go. Just as a quick example. If I, like I said, I don't know what the colors are going to be yet, but if I wanted to do those last minute, let's say if there's a pink room lighting, I would actually select, in this case, probably the shadow layer. And I'd create a new layer just under the lines, probably set it to screen. It might actually be normal, would be best. And take the gradient tool.
Gotcha. Now I see.
And start working like that. And if it spilled over too far, I could do some selecting some of these layers to actually beat the color back a bit, or what have you.
Right.
So, but since I don't know what it's going to look like back there yet, I'll leave that away.
Right.
Or I'll leave that off. Anyway, so I'm going to flatten that. And, I'll run an auto tone and auto contrast just to see what happens. Auto color almost always turns it blue, and it did it again. I don't know why it does that.
It's always, I find that it always does that.
Oh, the saturation just slightly. Okay, one last thing I do that I learned from a few people on DeviantArt is sort of this uniting color. There's a gradient that's just blue, red, yellow.
Mm-hmm.
So I lay that on, oops, not on that layer, on top of that on a separate layer.
Right.
I try to get my main figure or main feature in the red area as best I can. And then I set this layer to soft light, and then I bring it down to maybe 30%.
Look
It's
at
not 30%. There it is. Might even be 20.
That's so
there.
Interesting. Look at that.
But it brings out some of the colors a bit more. With the warmness on top of his face, it actually inadvertently draws you to him.
Yes.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
now I'll throw that into a different layer, because once again, this is all about preserving what's come before, just in case.
Yeah.
Flat matte. So if we zoom in right now to 100%, you can still see a lot of, well, that's going 100. You can still see a lot of my brush strokes in there from the pencil tool.
Oh, okay.
And that, I mean, on a comic page, it'll probably be about that large. Or on the cover, well, actually a little bit smaller. So it wouldn't be as noticeable, but this is still where I go to filter, noise, add noise, and oops, it's over here. And I usually put in about 7.
Okay.
And now a lot of that has been sort of beaten back a bit. It's a little more subtle.
It's almost like it's dimming it a little bit, kind of.
Right.
Bringing the two, bringing the black line and the gaps and the coloring together more.
Yep. Yeah. And if this were it, that would be, I'd throw my signature file on it and save it down as a TIFF, and that would be it. Yeah. I mean, because of course they would, over at production at Titan, they'd be responsible for putting on all the logos and what have you.
And you would give them a layered file, at least like in terms of foreground and background, so they could easily place the logo and so forth.
No, they don't actually ask for those.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, they just want the flattened TIFF.
Okay.
Which to me, I think that means if they do overlap, they cut it out themselves.
If they do a mask or whatever,
yeah. My my editor probably can do it too, because he's actually he's actually an artist himself, and has in the past, especially early on, he did the roughs for me, and he would say, "This is what we're looking for in the cover."
Oh, cool! Almost like a traditional magazine or book editor kind of situation, which is actually kind of cool in a way, right? Because that would cut some time down too.
Yeah, I mean, if I always say to him, I'd like to do a cover, and he'd say, sure. And I'd say, what do you want? More often than not, he's saying, give me some ideas, and I'll tell you. He's more than welcome to, at any time, say, what we need is X standing here and B standing there. And I'd be, happy to do it. But especially with a lot of these Doctor Who covers, I have free reign. I also have somewhat free reign with the Warhammer covers I've been doing.
Yeah, can you show us one of those?
That'd be, this one is the one I can show.
Okay, awesome.
There were some notes on this because there's a very particular way the armor is articulated, and so they wanted to get that as accurate as possible. So I couldn't put him in the pose I initially had him in, because the armor wouldn't move like that. But other than that, I said, what's the level of violence? They said, well, you can't have, human heads flying off and blood everywhere. I'm like, okay, what about alien gore? Yeah, that's fine, as long as it's not red. And I said, okay, fine.
Yeah, fine.
So that's what I got going on with that.
Can you show us a Robotech and maybe, I don't know, whatever else might be?
Well, the Robotech was the action figure I brought up earlier.
Oh, that's right. And
let me see.
Or even other Doctor Who covers.
Okay, let's do that one.
Because now that we understand your process better, it'll help to sort of, now that we can, it'll be more interesting, kind of peering through some of these other covers. So this is when you were still doing a non-black line like that Christopher Eccleston cover, right?
I think that one was a black line.
Oh, that's a black line. Okay.
Let me.
That's because of the illumination of the explosion.
Yeah, I did put some illumination in there, which changed it up because there is that rim light on him.
Right.
And that one I showed earlier.
Yeah, that's a really great page. Or is that a cover?
That's a cover.
Oh, that was a cover. Okay.
Yeah, I asked before I did it. This they'll letter it themselves, but I did those letters quick in Photoshop to show them what I was looking for,
Right.
and they're okay with that. That I'm putting words on the page.
Yeah, because
that used to be a thing. People used to talk on covers all the time. It wasn't just posing.
It was very much a house-to-house thing. Like Dell Comics, never any talking on the covers. DC, for a long time, did not have spoken words on the covers until like basically the 60s. Marvel from the get-go had both. But yeah, like it's very interesting. Some publishing houses don't like it. Some publishing houses encourage it. It's all different.
See, and I know Marvel and DC nowadays have a lot of their top artists doing basically covers for the library that they can just bank for later. Right. And that's sort of what I'm doing with a lot of these Doctor Who covers. I don't know where they're going to show up. Yes. And since I don't know what's going on in each issue, I decided to just make, this is sort of a generic thing, an explosion and running. That's very Doctor Who. Yes. This, I decided, here's a little story. It's the Doctor's been crawling through ductwork and whoops, he's come up between these guys. Are they good? Are they bad? Who knows?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. I didn't really think to even ask because you're not necessarily doing covers specific to a particular issue.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. So so this is an entirely different part of the process we didn't cover, which is like, given that you're not getting a script for a certain issue, a certain story, you have to kind of come up with images that are intrinsically identifiable as any Doctor Who story for that character. So you actually have to do a little storytelling here yourself. You're actually writing these covers yourself. Then that's very interesting. That's another layer to it that I didn't even think to ask you about.
These aliens, I don't even know what they're called because I just made them up.
Sure.
Which is actually true of a lot of the aliens I come up with. I don't know what they're called. I'll go through and name them one day. But this was my ode to 2016 because it actually shows in the globe that I put there, which is a 3D rendered piece. It's not just a piece of stock photo. That's actually a 3D globe. I made sure the USA and Great Britain were visible as part of the world burning in his little holographic projection.
Sure.
And yeah, this one I wanted the Doctor to be sort of against this really psychedelic background with a impossible puzzle box, trying to figure out this puzzle box which can't possibly exist in normal 3D space.
Do you do each year like a Dalek cover, a Cyberman cover,
No,
cover,
in fact, never Dalek covers. I'll probably never get to draw the Daleks because we're not allowed to use them.
Oh, I see.
They're owned by a different estate within all of that, and you have to get permission from the estate owners in order to use the Daleks in Doctor Who, even when they appear on the show.
So it's the case that any of the franchisees that do comics have access only to specific villains or whatever.
They can use the Cybermen. We weren't allowed to use the Cybermen over at IDW, but they have used them a few times at Titan. Daleks to be mentioned. I've drawn Dalek equipment. I've drawn Dalek ships, but I cannot draw a Dalek.
Right. And any of the other races or villains do they reoccur in the comics, or are you required to do some covers that cover some of those kinds of characters?
They have characters that they've created for the comics. Actually, one of the characters I created for the Ninth Doctor story I worked on just recently appeared again in another Ninth Doctor story, and for some reason they colored him completely differently, which sort of annoyed me. But because all you had to do was look at the previous comic to realize he wasn't yellow but purple. So I guess we'll explain that as at a certain age they change their color. They're aliens.
I ask more questions about Who, not because I'm actually a Who fan particularly, but because it seems like the most potentially problematic or effortful of any of the licensees that you're sort of working with.
That's why I usually avoid any established aliens on the cover unless I ask first. It's
or
almost
maybe
always,
unless they had a need for you to do it, possibly.
right. If they said, we need a Cybermen cover, I'll do a Cybermen cover.
And does that also apply to the companions? Because you might be doing a 9th Doctor, 10th Doctor, whatever, but because there's different companions, you might decide to do a Rose cover, but maybe they wouldn't need a Rose cover because Rose is not in a issue that's coming up, right? So
right.
So how does that work?
And well, the 10th Doctor has two new comic book only companions with him currently.
Okay.
And
you have the ability to
I
play with that stuff.
I haven't felt confident enough yet to draw them, so I've actually avoided putting them on covers.
Okay. So because I saw the one Rose cover and I was wondering, like, do you tend to, throw in other characters and other whatever? And that's why I was wondering.
Yeah. I try to just keep it to the Doctor, unless there's Rose is such an intrinsic part of the 9th Doctor that it's usually pretty safe.
Okay.
And the way they're telling the 9th Doctor stories, they take place in between a certain episode and a certain episode. And the 3 main cast members are going to survive, because obviously they do. So it's pretty safe to work with those. But as far as the issue to issue for the comic only companions, you don't know what's going to happen to them.
Right.
Let's see. Oops, where did all my...
Are there...
This was probably...
Oh, go ahead.
Where is it? I'm opening up a cover which was probably the most technical thus far.
Okay.
This one.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, I went a little bit crazy with the alien tech up in the ceiling of this ship.
It's very much like what you would expect to see in a 70s heavy metal comic.
I was looking at a lot of Jeff Darrow, and who else was I looking at? Actually, a bit of Mobius at the same time.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why this. I think Mobius came into play with the nonsensical bomb or engine or whatever this is they're trying to fix.
Right.
But yeah, that's one of those that has, each Doctor is on their own layer. This is the noise version. Where are the Doctors? So I can turn off each Doctor here, so they're just all gone. But
so you did not draw a full figure for the center figure?
Nope.
Okay.
I resisted because I knew he would just get covered up anyway.
Okay. But if we were to take away that engine or bomb, you would see full figures for the others. Is that correct?
Nope, because I punched a hole in them.
Oh, you punched a hole. But I mean, the original drawings, there were 3. There were
not full, but they went to about here.
Right, like a little bit deep into the thing, just to give you playroom. Yeah.
Yeah, because I knew that there would be open bits in the bomb.
Now, when you colored this cover, did you color the individual figures in separate files and bring them in, or did you do it all in the one?
It's all in the one.
In the one, okay.
Yeah, if it started to get slow, I might save it and then open up a new file and then flatten those layers and then continue on.
Oh, I've got a text from Randall saying, I got to head out. Thanks, everyone.
Oh yeah, I see that now too.
Thanks for coming in, Randall, and your questions.
But yeah, so that's basically
how you do
the whole process on that, from part of drawing to completion. I mean, yeah, like we discussed, there's going to be more going on in this one, but as far as a kind of abbreviated version of the rest of the process, yeah, that's what it is.
And if you were before we finish, if you were going to have, let's say, if he had his sonic screwdriver or some other object that had a energy field around it, you might do like you did in that 3 Doctor cover, where it'd be a color hold for the black line of the shape of that energy field, and then
Yeah,
you would do
I actually have that saved in a separate file, so I don't have to do that anymore. But yeah, that's how it would work. Actually, now that you remind me, I was supposed to go through here and actually change some of these.
Yeah. Or the impossible object, for instance, that's a separate
Oh,
object, and it's not black lines. It's actually, a different color for the main line, and then
right.
Subsequent layers to give it depth and translucency and so on.
Right. I'm just quickly going through here and knocking some of these out. These are some of the color holds that I meant to do, so they'll still show up because they're darker than the surrounding, but they won't be as black, and therefore it won't be screaming, "I'm a line, I'm a wrinkle, look at me."
So what color are you using for that?
I just selected one of the darker colors from this area over here.
One of the darkest flesh tones.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
And then I use the checkerboard on the lines only. So, I can scribble back and forth, but it won't leave the lines. If I turn off the checkerboard,
right,
you'll see everything. But
yeah. And I know for me, I might have to figure like a central point to sort of say these are black lines, but then coming out from that central point, they're brown or the other color. Is that how you work it, kind of?
Sort of. I decided, and I've done this before with Capaldi's pictures.
Yeah.
That a bit darker. That I'd rather. I'll keep in like these major wrinkles here, the bit underneath the chin. I'll keep in his lips, or else it starts to look weird. And all of this stuff here, I'll keep.
Right. The brow stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And around
but the rest of the stuff, it's sort of, you sort of still get it from the shadow, and if you're actually holding the cover in your hand, you can still see these lines here.
Right. Right.
Yeah, if I were coloring myself interiors, I wouldn't bother with these because it'd just be too much work. But like I said, I'd get someone else to do it in the future anyway.
Yeah, right. And you would not do anything to the hairlines, is that correct?
Yeah, most of the time. Once again, the exception is blonde hair. I would probably turn some of that those interior lines brown, so it's not as with like rose. I would fix that.
Right. Because
because
it's a little too intense having black lines on that kind of hair.
Yeah, and Capaldi actually does still have some color in his hair down near his temples and the back of his head, so it's okay to have a lot more black line there.
Right. And that is a Blair Shedd Doctor Who cover.
Oh, yep.
Woohoo!
Now, all of you can do this at home.
That's right.
Please try this at home.
We're all going to do that. In fact, we're all going to do it right now.
Yep. I will grade tomorrow.
That's right.
Yep. Everyone's going to stay up tonight and do that right now. That's
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It's been a real. It's really hard to, come up with all these processes on your own, and it's really helpful to have people who are just grinding through professional work, so that we can learn how to kind of streamline and make our work better. If there's anything, are there any just general words of wisdom that you would definitely want people to know? I'm not being necessarily talking about specific Photoshop tricks or whatever, but more bigger picture issues in terms of like getting better.
Don't be afraid of photo reference. Don't be afraid of looking stuff up on the internet. It's there for a reason. Mm-hmm. Jesse has heard this before. Randall, if he was still here, has heard this before. Things like there's no excuse if you're drawing a police officer to not have what a police officer would wear or what a police officer's gun looks like. There's no excuse for that.
There's this thing called the internet, where you can find things.
Yeah, and it's free. You can. I mean, when I went to Kubert, the internet, was my first year was 1996.
Oh yeah, okay.
And people had the internet, but not everybody had the internet. And one of our first tasks in, I think it was our general drawing class or whatever was to develop a reference file. And they meant an actual file filled with reference. And so our teacher gave us each a subject. And I think I got airplanes and airplane interiors. And I was to find pictures of airplane interiors. A lot of the other my classmates had to go to like the library or to the bookstore and buy magazines and cut out things, photocopy things. I went on the internet and I think was using Dogpile or Ask Jeeves at the time. I looked up airplane interiors and I got a whole file of it. And I brought in like 10 different pictures of airplane interiors. Yeah. And soon after, I stopped keeping a paper file because there was really no reason to.
Right. But in the old days, we would have to make our own morgue and the flat file of everything. And that was just how you did it. And everybody had a different way. Some people mounted them. Some people photocopied them all so that they'd have something that was easy to trace on a light box, whatever. But, but everybody did their thing. And
I mean, I still have comics that inspire me. Right next to my desk, I have, this is a great book if I'm drawing Batman stuff. This is New York in the 40s. Old black and white photos, great black and white photos with a bookmark of New York in the 40s. And this is noir. This is straight up stuff you would use in a noir comic or a noir piece. I also have more recent books of New York City and such. So I keep certain things around, but most of the time I just look it up on the internet.
Sure. But as far as like your personal work, the quality of your work, other than the obvious stuff, which is that you have to work on your stuff every day, or at least many days, in order to get better. The only way you can get better the only way you can draw better is by drawing. The only way you can color better is by coloring, etc. What other stuff would you tell people?
Boy, there's a lot of things I could throw out here. Figure drawing is important. Learning the basics. Just don't worry about style. That's the last thing you got to worry about. If you can't draw a car or you can't draw a decent picture of your grandmother, you don't have to worry about how you're going to draw a ninja flipping over himself in a full face mask. You gotta really learn to draw your pet dog first. You can't just say, that's too hard, so I'm only going to draw X. That might be fine if it's just a hobby and that's all you're ever going to do. But if you actually want a job doing something, no. You need to learn how to draw it all. I think that's all I got. I mean, I could go on a rant for hours. Jesse has heard these before.
Yes, they're all very important.
But it really comes down to don't be afraid of reference. Don't be afraid to actually put in the work. None of this can hurt you. Try new things all the time. In high school, I took pottery, I took photography, I took printmaking, I took life drawing, I took oil. No, that was acrylic painting. I took painting, and I took a computer class. I mean, just try everything. You never know what's going to be useful in the future. I mean, heck, pottery came up because sometimes we just do modeling with pottery, and let me turn on that camera again. Hello.
Yeah,
there we go. For the Ninth Doctor series, I had these big metallic aliens that had guns on their arms, and I couldn't figure out exactly how even though I designed it, I couldn't figure out how their arms looked at different angles. So I got some Super Sculpey, and I sculpted the forearm of one of them.
Right.
So I could just look at it.
You could light it. You could take a picture of it.
Right, and that's just one of those things that I'm glad I knew how to do that. And now I'm going to start trying to teach myself ZBrush, for instance, to learn more modeling. And hopefully in the future, if I design an alien, I can design him in ZBrush as well, so I could light him there and spin him around and look at him. So yeah, it's try everything once. Or who said that quote? Oops. And hold on, I gotta find this quote. It's attributed to Sir Thomas Beecham, but there's some question about if he actually said this. But Sir Thomas Beecham, try everything once except incest and folk dancing.
There you go.
And that's sort of what I live by. But yeah.
Can you actually switch your camera back to you? Because right now we're just looking at your desktop, and
it's a beautiful desktop.
It's a beautiful desktop, but I'd rather either see your work or see you.
Okay. Here, I'll do this then. Because I like this cover right now.
Excellent.
Because I get to draw Star Wars, so there's my space wizard with a laser sword.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. So yeah, terrific having you, and really, it's just really unique and a really unique pleasure, and to have the ability to actually like see how somebody works and not have a specific time limit, so that you can really get through the piece of work and be able to ask questions. Thanks a lot for anybody in the live chat who was asking us questions. Thanks a lot for both Randall Drew, who actually has his own comics at Arcadia Comics, and from Jesse Dorona, who is at jessedorona.com, and he is also a comics creator as well, for insights and questions. But lastly, I'll thank Blair Shedd, Vermont comic artist, 8 years working in the biz, and Kubert School grad, and now working in his vocation, making covers, sometimes doing interiors, also doing Telepathetic for Sitcom Comics. Support him and enjoy his work. I actually find you to be my favorite Doctor Who comics artist.
Thank you.
And
until you meet another one, and then you have to.
I really like them. I really do. I do like it the best. So it's nice to see the work, and it's nice to see the progression, and it's good to have you as a friend and a vocational friend as well.
Happy to be here, and I'd be also happy to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I would love to get into more of your process, and it's great having other creators in the talk, so that they have other things to add. So this was a making comics live demo Q&A, comics coloring, but actually comics drawing and coloring in Manga Studio EX and in Photoshop with Titan Comics, Doctor Who cover, and sometimes interior artist Blair D. Shedd. Thank you so much for being here.
Happy to do it.
All right.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
Thank you, Jesse.
Sorry that I didn't talk very much, but it was all very interesting.
You talked enough. You talked enough. You interjected when you needed to. That's what was needed.